The conversation ended hours ago. By every measurable standard, it went fine. Nobody walked out. Nothing broke. There were no visible cracks in the surface. And yet here you are, back inside it. Replaying it. Not because something went wrong, but because your mind has decided, quietly and without asking permission, that it isn't finished yet. You keep returning to a single sentence. A pause that lasted half a second too long. The specific way their voice dropped on a particular word. And you're running it again, not simply to remember what happened, but to understand what it meant, what it revealed, and whether what you said actually landed the way you needed it to. This is not anxiety. This is not a malfunction. What you're experiencing has a specific shape and a specific cause, and understanding it will change how you see yourself in a way that cannot be undone. Most people who replay conversations assume the same thing about themselves, that it is proof of something unstable, something excessive, something that separates them from the people who seem to move through social life with an ease they can never quite access. They watch others walk away from conversations without a second thought and quietly conclude that the problem is theirs, that they are too deep inside their own heads, too invested in things that others simply release. What they rarely consider is that the replay itself might be telling them something true. Not about their dysfunction. About the quality of their attention. The mind replays what it could not fully process in real time. This is not a quirk. It is a design feature. When a conversation moves through you faster than your capacity to absorb it emotionally and analytically at once, something in you stays behind. It lingers in the unresolved space between what happened and what it meant. And it keeps working the problem, turning it over, testing interpretations, recalibrating, not because you are broken, but because your relationship to people is not casual enough to let moments pass without weight. Consider what replay actually requires. It requires that you register the other person's tone, their body language, the rhythm of their pauses, the gap between what they said and what they chose not to say. It requires that you cared enough to hold the moment inside you long after it concluded. It requires a mind that treats human interaction as something worth understanding at a level that goes well beneath its surface. The people least prone to replay are not necessarily the most psychologically healthy. They are often simply the least attuned. Their ease is not peace. It is indifference wearing the mask of composure. Some people don't replay conversations because they were never paying close enough attention to remember them in the first place. Here is where the picture changes. What you have been calling overinvestment is, at its core, a form of precision. The replay is your mind attempting to bring an imprecise moment into alignment with your internal standard for genuine connection. You are not obsessing over the conversation because you are weak. You are doing it because you have a finely calibrated sense of what human interaction could be, and you cannot rest inside the gap between what happened and what was possible. That gap is where the loop lives. And closing it requires more than time. It requires understanding. You don't replay conversations because you're too sensitive. You replay them because you sustain a level of attention that most people never learn to hold. But this is where the behavior becomes more honest and more complicated. Because the replay is never purely analytical. Woven through the recalculation is something older, a question running beneath all of it at a frequency most people never consciously hear. Did I do this right? Did they leave that conversation carrying something real? Did I matter to them the way they mattered to me? And when you trace that question back to its origin, you find something more fundamental than social anxiety. You find what happens when a person has learned, somewhere in their history, that the most painful outcome of a human interaction is not conflict or awkwardness, it is invisibility. The terror beneath the replay is rarely, "Did I say the wrong thing?" The terror, at its root, is, "Was I truly seen?" And that is the most honest thing that can be said about this behavior. It is driven not by fragility alone, but by an acute awareness of how rarely genuine contact between two people actually happens. The people who replay most intensely are often those who have felt, through love, through loss, through longing, how briefly and how accidentally real understanding between two human beings can arrive and disappear. They replay because they know, at some level beneath language, that moments matter. That what passes between two people inside a single conversation can be real or hollow, and that the difference between those two things is not trivial. The people who find it easiest to leave a conversation without looking back are almost always the ones who took the least from it. What this means for you is more important than any technique or correction. It means the shame you carry around the replay is not accurate. You have been reading your own behavior as a symptom of something wrong with you when it is, more precisely, the signature of something exacting within you, a mind that holds people with a seriousness that most social environments were never designed to accommodate. That does not make the loop painless. It does not mean every replay leads somewhere useful or kind to yourself. But it changes what the behavior means about who you are. You are not someone who cannot let go. You are someone for whom letting go requires understanding, and you are unwilling to release what you haven't yet made sense of. That is not a weakness. That is a particular kind of integrity. One that most people will never examine closely enough to recognize in themselves, or in you. If this reached something you felt but never had words for, this channel exists for exactly that, the parts of human experience that most conversations are afraid to enter. Subscribe if you want to keep going.